To this story now. Yesterday marked a week since President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered his 2023 SONA address. He also had the opportunity to respond to a debate by MPs. He lashed out at opposition parties, calling them self-serving, saying they don't come up with constructive solutions. Political analyst Levy Ndou joins us now to dissect some of the highlights of Cyril Ramaphosa's response. Mr. Ndou, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. A very interesting response. After great criticism from opposition parties, do you believe that the president actually met the opposition parties at the level at which they pitched insofar as his response is concerned?
Good morning, Fundo. Good morning to the viewers at home. The debate on the State of the Nation address in South Africa appears to be the moment in which opposition parties and different members of parliament would vent their frustrations and anger on certain things that are not being done properly in their view. It's also a moment in which the program of government is outlined and the president would therefore has to defend nor acknowledge some of the issues that are raised by opposition parties. In this case, even though you have a situation where politicians would on numerous occasions differ or disagree, he put them in a corner to say, on the fundamentals we agree. And it is true that all political parties are in parliament because they want to better the lives of ordinary citizens. And where they actually differ is on the strategies to make a difference or on the pace on which certain things are actually moving. And at times, even though you might feel that opposition parties would appear to be very harsh when they express themselves, it should also be borne in mind that they actually do that not only to inflict pain on the president and the ruling party, but because they want to see a difference in the ordinary lives of South Africans.
You say they agree that they need to service ordinary citizens or ensure there's a better life for all, but the problem becomes the pace or the lack of implementation ever so often. But is that not really the crux of the matter, that it is a problem when the pace is too slow or there's hardly any implementation?
It is a problem. It should be acknowledged by government. And one would have expected that government would have started to do things differently. If you look at the State of the Nation address as presented by Ramaphosa, presented by Jacob Zuma, presented by Thabo Mbeki and Nelson Mandela, the challenges that we have remains the same. And what one would expect will be maybe to develop a much better approach in dealing with these challenges, or maybe identify them one by one, deal with them and ensure that they're actually in the past. The unfortunate part that...
So some could argue that, yes, the challenges remain the same, but the scale, it's now far too significant. If we talk about unemployment, it's always been a challenge, but the number of unemployed individuals now is more higher, perhaps warranting more urgency in implementing to address the issue of unemployment and perhaps to also stimulate the economy. So at that level, some are looking at the scale of the problem now, how big it has become, but are also looking at the number of years, that now it's a good amount of time, perhaps in some's eyes, it's 29 years later since that promise of a better life for all. So wouldn't you say that they are now growing impatient, legitimately so?
It will be quite correct and with sufficient legitimization why people will grow impatient. It will be informed by the fact that there appears to be a slow pace in addressing some of the challenges that ordinary citizens face. Of course, there are instances where there are some external factors that will contribute to the challenges that we face. But equally, you expect the government to be able as well to be able to match the pace of the challenges as they come across. What one would also expect from government is that you don't have to do things the same way all the time. You expect government to say, we have tried this, we've tried that. It is time now to change the gear and do things differently. Maybe changing of the gear on the part of government is to introduce the Minister of Electricity. And maybe it will work or it might not work. But at the heart of the challenges in South Africa is the load shedding and on no power supply, which my expectation is that government has to deal with it as a matter of urgency.
Would you say perhaps another change as well is the slow pace it's taking to reconfigure government? That ordinarily South Africans had become so used to even a midnight reshuffle, but now we're seeing a president that has been criticized, but perhaps he feels that the moment requires that he take greater time to consider who should make it onto the cabinet. Do you see that perhaps as one of the changes that they're making now, that they're not simply reconfiguring for the sake of reconfiguring?
My expectation would have been that we should be having someone dealing with load shedding already. I'm aware that most of us would want things to be done very quickly. And at the same time, there would be a number of consultations and carefully taking decisions before they're actually being implemented. But I think I would have loved that the process of ensuring that load shedding comes to an end has to be done very fast. Equally, there has always been a talk on the reconfiguration of government. Maybe the consultations are still going on within the party or other quarters, but my expectation is that one should see this happening as a matter of urgency because the wait has been long enough.
What I noted is that the president said a number of politicians opted for dishonest, self-serving rhetoric as opposed to acknowledging that state capture and the pandemic greatly impeded significant growth in the country. Your views on just that statement, do you also share the sentiments that perhaps politicians fail to appreciate the damage from state capture or the damage done by the COVID-19 pandemic?
You unfortunately cannot speak or instruct members of the opposition to think or speak in the way that you like. And I think the focus of the politicians and mainly the opposition is to ensure that there is accountability on the part of the executive, and their focus is exactly on that. I think the president has to take this not only negatively, but he must take it positively and say, whatever the tone used, or how it was expressed, what brings them together is that they are doing it for the sake of ensuring that South Africans have a better life. They might differ on many fronts, but those are the issues that oppositions have to raise if they want to see things done differently.
Mr. Ndou, thank you very much for your time this morning. That's political analyst Dr. Levy Ndou.